Welcome back to another episode of the Jackie Service Show. This one's going to be fun because Mike and I, my guest today, are meeting for the first time on this podcast. We have connected on social media, and when he hopped on Zoom, I said, there's people out there that tell me I can't meet great people on Twitter, and I don't believe it, and neither does he. So we're here to kind of kibosh that mentality that you can't meet epic humans on social media platforms and to have a great conversation to share with you today. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to connecting, and absolutely, I think online in today's age is how you connect and meet, people with different cultures and backgrounds, and so vastly different. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
And we just found out, and this is actually where we're going to start, which is more of a hot seat or rapid fire questions, which is a get to know you type of mentality I like to start the show with. One, because I'm actually getting to know you. I know a lot of my guests on the podcast. And two, it helps our listeners really connect to your story and who you are as well. And we're going to start really easy. We're going to start with, where did you grow up?
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up in Metro Detroit in Michigan, in the Midwest. And pretty much spent the first 22 years of my life in the greater Detroit area, both, same house. And then I went to a small school near Ann Arbor, where University of Michigan is. So I'm a Michigander.
I love it. And where do you live now? Are we still in Michigan?
So I'm very nomadic. I haven't lived in the same spot for more than 6 months in several years. But I'm currently residing in Metro Detroit. I live with my best friend about 20 minutes from where we grew up. So I'm back in Michigan for now.
All right. So in 6 months, we'll have another podcast show and you'll be somewhere else in the world.
Exactly. Yeah, you never know where you're going to find me.
I love that. I love that. What I love about that is we're only a couple hours apart. So I'm Canadian. I live in Ontario on the coast of Lake Huron, but I fly out of Detroit all the time. And Mike and I were just chatting about that we're really just neighbors. We don't live too far apart. So let's take that like nomadic. The next question is actually goes with your nomadic lifestyle, which is, where is your favorite place, or where has been one of your favorite places in the world to travel to?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I get to ask that all the time. And it's so difficult to pick one. So I'm going to kind of blend it. So I've lived in Germany twice. And the second time I was working over there for a Fortune 100 company. And in 6 months, I got to experience 15 different countries with a bunch of people who were in the program with me. And that to me was really, really impactful because I learned about different cultures. I mean, you drive an hour or two, like you drive into the Detroit airport, you go in Europe and you're in a place they speak a different language with different values and cultures. And so it really shaped how open-minded I am and really open to new ideas, because we're all humans ultimately, but we have our own practices and cultures. And so that's been one of my favorite experiences, I would say.
That's amazing. Germany's such a hub too. You can get anywhere so quickly in Europe. And I love that about Europe, is how quickly you can be immersed into different language, culture, around different people. It's a whole lesson in itself on life and humans and connection.
Absolutely. Well said. That's it. It's a good lesson on, we're all of one, we're all the same species, but we interact with each other and have such different thoughts. So it really is a really good open-minded way to live.
Love that. All right. Favorite book, either what you're reading right now or something in your past that shifted perspective or opened you up to see the world through kind of a new lens?
Yeah. The Four Agreements, if you're familiar.
Very.
Toltec
Love
wisdom
that book.
on happiness. Yeah. So the Four Agreements, I read it last March and I've used it every day since. It's incredible.
I love that. Yeah, there's something really powerful about that book. And I love just like honing into what the agreements are that we make with ourselves and how we show up in the world. So yeah, great book. Love that one. All right, last one. If you could go back and give your 15-year-old self some advice as you started kind of this next chapter of life, what would you tell him?
Yeah, it's really good. I think the one thing that I would say is believe in yourself. You were stronger, smarter, and more capable than you know. So believe in yourself.
Mm, I love that. Thank you for sharing. I like to like throw you in the deep end right at the end there. Like, what's the one piece of advice that's helped you
Yeah,
through life? But man,
yeah,
the answers we get are just incredible in terms of how lived experience teaches us so much, and how, there's so many things that if we could go back in time and do it again, we would, but also our journey has led us exactly where we need to be. So believe in yourself. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah. It's a perfect question, especially for this HR people centric guru that you are. To ask, how would you talk to your inner child, like the inner child work? It's a great way to finish the hot round, but I love it.
Let's just throw you into the deep end. Like, we don't keep it surface
Yeah,
here all the time. We
yeah,
keep it light at the beginning, but then I really want to know who you are is what this podcast is all about. And you opened it up with the 4 agreements. When you tell me that that's the book that
oh
changed
yeah,
your life, I know you're open to going there.
yeah, absolutely. I prefer, I heard Aubrey Marcus say that the 2 things he wants out of an interaction with someone is laughter and a deep conversation, and I really subscribe to that. So I'm all in. If you anything, there's nothing that's off
So
the table. You're allowed to ask me anything.
let's go. One of my core values is depth, like depth and conversation. So, and who doesn't love a good laugh, a good joke here or there. So if you have any jokes, I welcome those as well anytime during the podcast.
Perfect. I'll save it for the end.
Amazing. Love it. I'll hold you to that. All right. So let's dive in. I appreciate you sharing some of those like get to know you questions, and really feel like I already feel more connected to you just understanding a little bit about your history. And then I go to like the real deep end, which is, all right, tell me the story. And I know there's so many different phases and stages to everyone's story, but I'd love to hear a little bit from your lens. What got you here?
Sure. Yeah, I like to use 3 pivotal moments to keep it succinct and powerful. So the 3 pivotal moments that shaped Mike and the person that you're talking with today. First, it started in my early teenage years. My family was very, very tight knit, and we had a focus and emphasis on education and hard work. And so the love of learning and growth mindset was instilled by my parents and my family, grandma, aunts and uncles. And so that was kind of the first pivotal moment. Was I always was reading and learning, and very studious. And so I focused there. And so then a second kind of pivotal moment as I came into my own and became an adult, I really learned that traveling was inspiring to me and meeting these new people and making connections. And at the same time, while I was in school, I met some very successful entrepreneurs, and they took me under their wing. I started building companies with them, for them. It's very, unique digital marketing and tech companies and platforms. And so, the second pivotal moment was learning to, move. I'd only been to like 3 states before I was 18. And when I was 19, I went on a plane by myself to Berlin and studied and spent a summer over there. And so just immersing yourself into being uncomfortable and trying these new things. That was the second pivotal moment. And then, I spent many years doing that. And then the third pivotal moment came right in 2020. And so at that time, we found out that my mom had been re-diagnosed with breast cancer. It was stage 4, terminal. And so I kind of stopped everything that I was doing to be with my family and spend the rest of my mom's life with her. And so, yeah, that's kind of the 3 pivotal moments. And kind of like the closure of that is after we lost my mom last fall, I had a good friend come to me, and he's very religious. And he said, you need to find what the thing is that your mom left behind that you're going to carry forward as her legacy. And so, I wept, I grieved, all the things that come with losing a parent. And, she was my best friend. We talked every day. And what came out of it was my purpose is to help others build their businesses, help others grow and launch and build the business of their dreams, because that was my mom. She was always asking what she could do for you, always asking how she could help and what you wanted. And so that's kind of wrapping up the third pivotal moment. Was I took this terrible, nobody's leaving this rock alive, as people have said to me, but and turned it into my purpose. So yeah, that's kind of a bit about me.
Mm, thank you for sharing. It actually speaks volumes. I reached out to you cold. Like, we did not have any relationship former, like we don't even have mutual contacts, which is usually how people end up on the show. I reached out to you and said, "Hey, I'm doing this podcast. I checked out your bio and your background, and I think you could really help the community. I think your story could support what we're trying to do here on the show." And without question, you said yes. And that's my first interaction with you, is you come from the heart and the lens of service. And you look through that lens of, hey, how can I help somebody else? And so without knowing that story, it's interesting. That was one of my, I like to acknowledge people, is one of the things I wanted to acknowledge about you and my interaction, my early stage interactions with you, is you just lean in and come from a place of service. So I share that with you from a complete outsider's perspective. And now with context and understanding where that lineage comes from and how deeply connected that is to your mom and her legacy and your carry forward purpose, I just want to commend you. And I have so much gratitude for that, of how you show up that way.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really, really powerful. Thank you for sharing and seeing that. I'm glad authentically that's how I'm coming across, because ultimately that's what I'm here to do now, is to help others. And being a guest on your podcast is like, absolutely, I'd love to have a great conversation, and so far it's held up to anything I expected and more. So yeah, thank you for that.
And I will say, deeply sorry to hear about the loss of your mom. And when health and disease comes through family units, it really rocks the core. And my listeners will know this, you won't. I actually was diagnosed with a brain tumor 10 years ago. And it was a pivotal moment in my life to really ask some of the bigger questions around purpose and what are we here for, and how can I create legacy, and what am I doing that matters, and what am I doing that doesn't matter, frankly. And when we talk about these kind of pivotal moments, you went through your 3, that's one of my pivotal moments where it really shook the foundation. In hindsight, in a beautiful and positive way, in the moment, it felt scary and rocky and turbulent and, terrifying. It was a very dark soul of the night type of experience. I have so much gratitude for still being here 10 years later, because there was question marks. And so with that, I always laugh because my last name is actually Service. And I don't think that was by accident. And I don't believe in coincidences fully. And it really reignited this level of service for me and how I can show up for others. And a big piece of why this podcast got started is my team finally said, it's time for you to start sharing the wisdom you have within with more people. And that's how you're going to continue to share the messages of the things you've learned in your life experience too. So anyways, just so many interconnectedness to our stories already. And when you share openly and rawly with what you've been through, it just immediately connects humans. So I feel deeply connected to you already. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing your story. I think that's really powerful. And I have this saying, life has a unique way of showing you what matters. And you hit on that exact point. Like 10 years ago, there were probably trivial things you were worried about. And then all of a sudden this diagnosis comes and everything that doesn't matter just drops to the floor. And you're like, okay, this is what matters. And you can focus there. And I think it's so cool how, far you've come, and now you're dedicating your life to people and helping people, with people strategy. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And going into that lens, the work we do is actually very similar. So you're dedicated to helping businesses grow. I feel the exact same way. I work with founders day in and day out who are struggling and are suffocating because of the level of responsibility they feel to keep the ship afloat and to keep things going. And my lens of how I can serve in the best way possible is this background through people and how people can unlock businesses if you get the right people in the right role at the right time. I'm curious, let's dive into this a little bit more around how you serve leaders and founders and companies, and When you say, I like to help companies grow, what does that mean?
Yeah, let's start there. So when I say help companies grow, I am a growth marketer through and through. That was what I, was studying in school, what I started doing in practice with these startups. So I'm a growth marketer. You bring a product, you bring me an idea, and I will bring it to life, and I'll get it in front of eyeballs, and I'll bring you conversions, whether it's users, revenue, engagement. That's just the way that my brain works. So growth marketing is how I would define how I help companies grow.
Awesome. I love that. What led you into that? So you said you did school, and then it sounds like there was a number when you were younger and traveling. You mentioned that you had met a bunch of entrepreneurs, and that kind of kicked off maybe some of your own entrepreneurial spirit. Talk a little bit about that journey for you.
Yeah, so I was sitting in a social media marketing class as a junior in college, and the CEO came in and he gave this presentation on how you use data and interactions, user experience to increase the amount of people that convert on your website. And it was a really, really technical conversation. And the whole time I was like, man, I don't know what this is, but I want to learn. So at the end of the class, I walked down, I gave him, I don't know, I had a business card of some sort that our business department had made us make. And I handed him a business card, shook his hand, said, I don't know what you just said, but I want to learn. And so I spent 100 hours as his intern learning all about digital marketing, Google Analytics, AdWords, advertising, design, how to project manage software developers. And from there, just launched into building a couple businesses with that tech company that had subsidiaries that were doing really cool platforms. We helped one startup incubate all the way from, it was a PowerPoint wireframe. And then 2 years later, they had an $8.5 million Series A check, all with, the strategy and development process and user experience that we put through. So I've had some really fun experiences that I like building stuff. Every day, if I get to build something, I mix a little bit of strategy with execution. That's a perfect day for me.
I love that. What would you say is one of your greatest gifts when you think about the executional side? You're talking about digital marketing and kind of growth strategy through the digital lens. Is there like a platform that you're just an expert at, or like where would you say is one of your greatest gifts in the executional side?
It's a great question, and I was just walking through some of this morning. It's the ability to take very complex things like a vision, or I want to get to X number of dollars per month in revenue, and breaking it down into actionable steps. So reverse engineering a vision all the way through to, here are the next 3 things I can do today that will put me on track to get to there. So that's I would say my gift is taking complex things and breaking them down and explaining them simply so we can achieve them.
Love that. When you've been inside the growth of some of these startups and, your feet on the streets, you're starting from square one, day one, the PowerPoint, one pager, all the way through concept and beta testing. Talk to us about the experiences you've seen. Like, what are the hiccups that show up? I know every startup's a little bit different, but what are some of the consistent struggles that you have seen founders or co-founders or startup companies bump into along the build?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first that comes to top of mind is who's your customer, understanding who your customer is, because as you go from this idea to actually having people use it, you need to really focus and be empathetic on who is the title, what do they need, what are they doing, what problems are they solving, and quantifying the problem to initiate them to use it. Because you might know that you do know that people are the limiting factor to scaling a company, right? That's your platform. It's like you need people to grow. But until you can emotionally charge a CEO or a founder, like, do you know how many hours a week you could save by hiring this person? Or do you know how much money they could generate every year by hiring a salesperson instead of doing it yourself? So you've quantified that problem to a specific person. you're not going to get off the ground. So that's the biggest problem. It's ideal customer profile and quantifying and putting the pain points in their face.
Do you sense that with the founders that you've worked with, do you sense that they're holding on to things too long? Are they giving up control too quickly? Like on that spectrum, what would you say shows up primarily with founders? For those
Yeah,
that
they
can't see the
hang on to
video,
it.
he's laughing, and I'm curious to get his response, because I'm assuming it's the same as mine, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm sure that you asked that very well, where it wasn't a leading question, but I know you know
It was
the
a leading
answer.
question.
So founders take extreme ownership over their baby, like the
Mhm.
platform, the product, the software, the service. It's their baby. So they take extreme ownership, and they struggle to delegate to people who are similar competency, maybe even better competency at certain things than them, because they psychologically believe it's theirs and they want to own it. And giving up that control is difficult. So something that I really preach when I'm starting to work with someone is, let's talk about what your strengths are, what are your weaknesses, and I use like 3 prompts. So I say, what do you love doing? That's where you should spend time. What do you like doing? That means you're going to be generally good at it. And what do you not enjoy? And I let them hang out in the first 2. And then what do they not enjoy doing? I either jump in if it's my area of expertise, or I go find someone who I can get the job done with, because I also recognize I have weaknesses. So that's generally how I try to convince them out of the things they shouldn't be doing. I think that answers your question. They take a lot of ownership, and I try to slowly come in and say, hey, let's leave some of these things you don't like doing, and you're probably not good at it either.
Yeah, there's a control factor there where that's just like deep connectedness to this vision that they're holding.
Sure.
And a big piece of what a founder needs to do and is most qualified at is to hold that vision and to keep coming back and iterating that vision over and over and over again. What I see happen most of the times, I usually when I'm connecting with founders, they've done a Series A, or they're on their way to a Series B, or they've just closed a Series B. And there's this investment that shows up where they're now thinking about team. And they're thinking about maybe not your first level of engineers or folks that are bringing kind of the concept to life, but they're now thinking about leadership team and who needs to kind of own different functionalities to grow and scale the business to the next level. And one of the things I see so often at that particular phase is you have a lot of founders who are operating in the seats of CEO and COO. So they're holding the vision and holding the company brand and all the details of that, in addition to needing to be the operator, and all decisions go through them and all sign-offs are through them. And it creates, frankly, they become the issue in terms of not allowing the company to scale as rapidly as it can. So that's the conversation I'm usually having. And you're exactly right. My question is always, what are you most uniquely qualified for within this organization? And how do we get you spending 80% of your time there, give you 20% still to like hold on to some of the things that are really important to you. But how do we flip it? Because it usually gets messy at that stage where it becomes really hard psychologically to let go.
Yeah. Yep. That's well said. I love the Pareto principle application that you use with them. I'm sure it's difficult at first, but if you can get them in that Pareto principle, if they're, generating whatever it is they're special at, I know it'll move the needle way more than them owning and operating. That's the toughest thing to own. Like you just mentioned, if you CEO your strategy and vision, and then your COO your execution, it's really tough to do both.
It certainly is. Yeah. From lived experience, it is, even in building and scaling my own team, it's, I catch myself and give you advice that I need to look in the mirror at and say, okay, where am I not living this truth too? And have to take that to heart. So yeah, it's a whole other beast. It's a whole other beast. I'm curious for you, as you've witnessed a number of companies grow and scale, and I know you've worked in a lot of different size companies. So startup phase to Fortune 100s, you've worked across all different sizes of companies. In your opinion, what role does hiring the right people, what role is the right people in the success of companies, in your opinion?
Sure. Let me reflect. So are you saying, is your question, what's the most important role to help a company succeed?
Let me ask it a different way. The question is more around the just the people agenda in general. When you've seen companies
Okay.
really thrive, what role are the A players or hiring the A players creating that next level or that next kind of phase of growth for companies?
So the question is more of like, how do you hire A players to, like what roles are A players filling that helps a company grow? That's the question.
Yeah, let's go that way.
Cool. I think the COO is a really crucial one. I think you have to bring in someone who knows how to operate a company, that knows how to get to the minutia of the detail. If you're moving physical goods, they have to have their head wrapped around lead times, how to move things around. If it's tech, they need to understand customer experience, the user experience, and look at data. So I think that's really most important. And once you have an operator in place, I think to answer the second part of the question, how do you scale, is you have to find a competent growth marketer who can look at data, understand how to spend budget, what's working, and double down there. And then when the things aren't working, you have to be able to call it quits and just say, hey, this channel's not working, and move on quickly. Fail fast is what they say, right?
I love that. There's this whole mentality of hire slow, fire fast, where it's like, hey, when things aren't working, call it. So similar kind of mentality of like, hey, if it's not working, call it and move on to the next area quickly.
Yeah, that's good. I'm sure that's easier said than done. And
oh gosh, it's very difficult to do that.
You touched on something earlier I don't want to miss either. It's that you talked about when you give advice, you want to make sure that you yourself look in the mirror and execute it too. And I call it eating your own dog food, as crude as that example might be. But anytime I'm very reflection based, I journal every day, and I challenge a lot of my clients to put their thoughts down when we're working together. And anytime I ask someone to go through like a group of prompts or like consider an activity, I usually do it too, because it's really cool to see the similarities and differences of how you might work with someone or decisions you might make. And you can even find a compromise if you do it too, that would be a better solution than one person just thinking of it themselves.
I love that. I'm a big proponent of get thoughts down on paper. I find when it's on paper, I can reflect and see things differently than when it's bouncing around, the marbles bouncing around in my head. And you start to see themes.
Oh, yeah.
You start to see, okay, these are the themes that keep showing up, and likely areas in my life I need to keep going down the path, or in business, okay, these are the things that I need to really double down on. But the collaboration of kind of teamwork and ideating together around how do we co-create a better outcome? Well, it's always going to be better if multiple people are involved. And I think to your point,
Yep.
you talked about your family upbringing, and you talked about some of the values of how you were raised with hard work and work ethic, and this whole, you eat your own dog food is something that I don't know if I might have butchered that, but that's what I heard. But it's this whole mentality of, I'm going to do it too. Like, I'm going to roll my sleeves up and get in there with you. And if we can't figure this out, we're going to work together. I'm actually curious how hard work and your work ethic has led you to today and the successes that you've had.
It's a good, really fun question to answer. So I think Seneca said, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And the hard work and the work ethic, that goes hand in hand with preparation. Because if you're putting in the work, if you're doing the reps, if you're learning the skills, that's you preparing for when an opportunity arises that you can say yes, or that they can accept you and say, yeah, this guy's qualified for it. So I think you mentioned the journey earlier, and when we were talking before the call, and the journey is the way. The Germans even have that as a saying. Der Weg ist das Ziel, which means that the goal is the journey. And so when you just emphasize and focus on doing the work and learning new skills and getting things done, it is ultimately going to be rewarded. And it'll put you in the right rooms for when the opportunity will arise. So I think that's how I would round it out, is the hard work has been the reps that have put me in the room for when an opportunity arrives, and then people call luck.
Mm. Hmm. I love that. Thank you for sharing. It's interesting. Again, a parallel. It's something I heard this through a lot of mentors early in my sports life. I was an athlete growing up, in my education life, and then in business life early on, which was this whole mentality of you will outwork anyone. And that's why you're going to find success in whatever area you want success in. It does not need to be linear or, about money or the cars or the external factors, which I was on that path prior to brain tumor. So don't get me wrong. That was definitely a path I was going down until I shifted kind of where the focus was. But when anyone says like work ethic and hard work is kind of core to how I was raised, my family unit, the values in which I was raised in, I always like to bet on those people. I'm curious to see where Mike is in 10 years because of that. You've already had such success, and now how much greater will your success be through the service lens and living out that legacy of your mom and taking that work ethic forward with you. I think it's going to be a really exciting next chapter for you as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I am excited, and I feel more aligned and more authentic with what I'm doing now. And I was telling this to a client this morning. All the businesses I've started and I've worked in and I've worked with, at some point I burned out of the day-to-day because I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't authentic to me. I was good at it. I can see a few steps ahead, so I could see where the money might come, or like you said, I'm not super materialistic driven, but we are a capitalist society, so that's generally an outcome that I would like. And I burned out of all those businesses. And now with the lens, like you said, the service lens of helping people has been so energizing, and I just love it. So I'm pumped for this journey too. I'm really looking forward. I look forward to every day, and that's the best part.
I love that. How has the flip of that switch for you? I'm curious to understand how that's changed. Has it changed who you work with, or has it changed the outcome or the lens in which you view the work you do through? Or is it both?
Definitely both, but who I work with is crucial. In the past, I've sacrificed values for, potential outcomes. I've sacrificed who I've worked with because I liked the idea, and I'm no longer willing to do that. I only accept clients and people that I really enjoy working with, that have good values. And since I stopped doing the former that I mentioned, sacrificing that, I've removed toxic people, I've removed energy suckers, energy vampires, and I am so much better off for it. So that's where I start. If I like you, if you're a good person, we have the same values and motivations, that's much easier for us to align on. And then we can get down to brass tacks of like, all right, what's the work going to look like?
So true. So true. The amount of times, even early in my entrepreneur career, where I would take clients to keep the lights on, right? Or I would go against intuitive pings of like, hey, this probably isn't going to go well, and say yes anyways for financial reasons, full disclosure. Always left me with those reflection moments to say, oh, it's interesting that you had that ping, you didn't listen to yourself, you chose to do it anyways. And here we are 6 months, 8 months, a year later with some of the same headaches or problems that they started with. That's been a big lesson for me in the last 7 years of running my own business, is listening to those pings. How do you decipher if somebody's somebody you want to work with? Yes, we could ask like, hey, what are your values? I can regurgitate those to you, but how do you know if there's true connection?
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on intuition. Intuition has definitely started to come to light for me. Then the next is like, I really have a long courting process, so I don't take on, a long-term commitment where we're like contractually together, similar that a marriage is, unless there's some serious, serious vetting. So it's just, I take my time, just like dating. You take your time
Mhm.
before you get serious. So that's the skinny of it. I don't jump into things quickly.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. All right. As we start to wrap this up, one of the questions or one of the topics that was kind of one of your core pillars was travel. You mentioned travel. What I heard beyond travel was this notion of immersing myself into being uncomfortable and
Hmm.
pulling myself out of my day to day life, what I knew for 19 years, and immerse myself into Berlin, a completely different country, culture, language, and learned a lot through that experience. What are you doing today to keep yourself uncomfortable?
Yeah, the thing I'm doing today is I recently started this journey of publishing my content online. And, I write out almost every day. I journal, it's right in front of me here. And I've been keeping it to myself for the last few years. And I had been dreaming about, you know, seeing all these people online publishing their content and it's killer. And I love that. I love that for them. And I was like, I can do this. This is what I do every day. I just keep it for me. And so I started sharing at the beginning of this year, started sharing my content online and posting about what I'm working on and my stories and my mindset and how I'm using it to get through. And it's every day, there's a little nerve wracking as I go post this vulnerable thing online about what I'm doing or my experience, but man, I'm meeting some really cool people like you through it. So that's how I'm staying uncomfortable today is trying to build, my personal brands and by telling stories of success, of failure, of hardship, and along the way, hopefully, I can help a few people skip some levels. Because man, the journey to get to this point has definitely not come without bumps and bruises.
So much so. And that's just it. If you had not taken that step forward, you and I would have never met. And there was a
Yep.
reason that I saw your content, went down the rabbit hole of your content, started reading about what you were talking about. I was like, heck, this guy's got a cool story. I want to know more. And that me listening to intuition, that ping of like, hey, reach out and invite him. What's the worst he can say? No, or he doesn't reply. Okay, we move on.
Right.
But
Right.
the chance that somebody opens up and says yes, and for you, I think about podcasting, what a great way to tell your story and what a great way for you to start to build that personal brand out even more and get in front of audiences that don't know you. And I think what a cool medium for you to also leverage kind of the writing on social media and then hopping on these podcasts to share your personality, which is just epic. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me too. This has been such a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to continuing it offline too. I think the things you're doing and the things I'm doing, as you pointed out so poignantly, they're in parallel to each other on the journey of growing companies. So yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I've appreciated it so much. I just want to acknowledge you again for being open to jumping on a podcast and didn't have a lot of context coming into this, and you were just so open and willing to share who you are and how some of your lessons can serve and help others. How can people find you? What are the best places for people to hang out with you, find you, learn more about who you are as a person, but also how you can serve them if they're thinking like, heck, I would like to have a conversation with this guy to see if I could be a good fit?
Yeah, so there's two main places you could reach out really quickly. One is on Twitter at Michael Scott Blue. So Michael Scott, like the Office character, and then BLU. And then the other one is going to pearlbusinesscoaching.com. You can check out my story and book a call. I honestly just love talking to people and meeting with people. I have people on my calendar, almost every week that I've never met before, and we just connect and have great story times. And I always say to a lot of founders or people who are looking to make the jump, worst case scenario is you meet an awesome person who gives you some actionable steps how to improve, what you're working on. That's worst case scenario for the anxious people out there. So yeah, pearlbusinesscoaching.com or Michael Scott Blue on Twitter. And thanks, Jackie.
Amazing. We'll link all that up in the show notes so people can find you easy and know how to get in and book with you. But Mike, so grateful. Thank you so much for your time and spending this this hour with us, and can't wait to keep the conversation going. And guys, until next time, we'll see you again on the Jackie Service Show.